Thanks for having me. This is my first time in Australia, my first time at Web Direction, so it's really exciting to be here. I think we've heard about a lot of really exciting technology here in the last few days, and you look around in our own lifetime and you look at something like a television set, and it wasn't that long ago that they weighed 100 pounds and they were heavy to put on a table surface. But now displays are lightweight, paper-thin, high resolution. You look at our computer processors and they can calculate things tens of thousands of times faster. I mean, in the last 2 decades, we've built an incredibly useful internet, and we've been able to access it in the palm of our hands. But there's a terrible trend emerging in technology today, and I think it's taking us away from what really matters. Now, I work in tech, so I'm partially blamed for this awful trend, and a lot of you do too, so you might be to blame as well. But I think if you listen closely today, you can hear how we can move past this awful trend and build a better tomorrow. Now, I'm a UX designer. To me, that means I solve people's problems, and right now I do that at Samsung Design America, where we create new technology to solve people's problems. And before I did that at Cooper, which is a design consultancy in San Francisco, where we solve problems for customers of startups to Fortune 50. Now, it's my personal goal to solve problems, but I think as an industry, we're riding a wave that's taking us away from solving people's problems. And what's so crazy about this awful trend is that it came from something so good. About 40 years ago, we were able to build smaller computer components. That meant we could build smaller computers, desktop computers. And we brought them into the workplace. But we forced people into this awful user experience. We forced the everyday person to use a command line user interface, to speak in a language written by programmers for computers. But then we got this. Xerox Labs ideas of a window, an icon, a menu, and a pointer. And WIMP converted to our first mainstream graphical user interface. And it was so good. We could point and click. We could drag and drop. What we saw is what we got. And about 10 years later, when we could start touching those interfaces, it was even better. But today, our love for the digital interface has gotten completely out of control. It's become our answer to everything. How do you design a better car? Slap an interface on it. A screen in the middle of your speedometer, so instead of checking how fast you're driving, you can check your Facebook and your Twitter. How do you design a better vending machine? Slap an interface on it. So instead of pressing a couple buttons, you can swipe and tap through buttons that kind of look like buttons. How do you design a better trash can? You slap an interface on it. A screen that shows you that it's raining outside while you're standing in the rain outside. How do you design a better toilet? This is the iPotty, which was debuted at CES last year. It's a children's toilet with a screen on it. Somewhere along the way we got confused. We started thinking user experience is the same thing as user interface. And you see this on job postings everywhere. They're looking for UX, UI designers. And it's led us to become surrounded by screens. Your workplace isn't decent if you don't have at least 2 monitors. Your smartphone isn't good if it's not at least 5 inches. We have over 1.2 million mobile apps. It's come to the point where our greatest minds aren't advancing science or taking us into space, but they're working at Facebook on ads for all of these screens. It wasn't that long ago that our lives were surrounded by paper, and we dreamed of a paperless world. Now, instead, our lives are surrounded by screens. And I think we should dream of a screenless world. I actually think that the best interface is no interface. And I'd like to show you how we can get there. I've created 3 principles. They're not about things, but they're about us, because it's us that we should be designing for. The first principle is to embrace typical processes instead of screens. Recently, a couple of major car companies have released apps for smartphones that are supposed to be an improvement on the car key. They let you do things like unlock your car doors from your smartphone. It sounds great in tech blogs, but let's sort of figure out how that really works. I walk up to my car, and I want to unlock my car doors. So I pull out my smartphone. I want to unlock my car doors, and I wake up my phone. I want to unlock my car doors, and I slide to unlock. I want to unlock my car doors, and I enter my passcode. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, and I hit the home button to exit my last opened app. I'm looking to unlock my car doors, and I hit my home button to exit my last open group. I'm still looking to unlock my car doors, and now I swipe through a sea of icons looking for that app to unlock my car doors. There it is, it's in the corner. It's kind of hard to find. And I want to unlock my car doors, and I tap to launch the icon, launch the app. The app loads, and I end up with this incredible map of North America. Looking to unlock my car doors, and it's really hard to figure out, but there's a center option there that says control, so I'm just going to go ahead and guess that maybe that might be the way to unlock my car doors. Go ahead and tap control, and now I have this list option where there's incredible features here, like a Google search, which is exactly why you'd launch a BMW app. But one of the options there says locking/unlocking. So I'm here to unlock my car doors, and I go ahead and tap on that button. Fortunately, I end up with this slider. One way is lock, the other way is to unlock. So I slide to the right to unlock it. It says data transfer successful. I think that means my car doors are unlocked now. And yeah, I can finally physically open my car door. Is this an improvement on the car key? I don't think so, right? I mean, if you kind of break down what happened there was me, right, walking to my car. There was all the steps I had to do with the digital interface. And then there was really my goal, which was to open the car door. But let's say we embrace this first principle. Let's say we embrace typical processes instead of interfaces. Well, we'd end up with something like this. 2 steps. Seems kind of crazy, seems kind of out there. But in the late 90s, before we got caught up with apps and screens, Mercedes-Benz created this technology called keyless go. You pull the door handle and it sends out a low-frequency radio signal. If your keys are in your pocket or in your purse, the car door is unlocked and you can open your car door. So it embraces a typical process. All you do is pull open the car door handle. Now some people say, well, okay, this is really nice, but the app is really useful when you forget your keys, when you lock your keys in the car. But the beautiful thing about Mercedes Keyless Go is it always knows where the keys are, so you can't actually lock your keys in the car. The entire automotive industry is filled with screen-based thinking. This is something called Viper Smart Start. It's an app that's been featured in AOL, Autoblog, and Engadget, and it actually looks kind of better than the one we were just looking at. It's got 4 or 5 common actions and big icons. But we think this is good because we're used to looking at screens. We think this is decent because we analyze wireframes. But let's look at one of these actions, opening your trunk. And instead of screens, let's start with insights. This is what someone looks like when they're carrying something to the trunk of their car. This person happens to be Mitt Romney, who ran for president of the United States and wanted to be the everyday man. So let's say here he represents the thing he always wanted to be. He's carrying something in the trunk of his car. He's got his hands full. He probably doesn't want to put this heavy thing down, pull out his smartphone, and go through all those crazy steps. And the design team at Ford realized this. They realized that even though his hands are full, his feet are free. So they put a sensor underneath the bumper of the car. It looks for a shin and then a foot kick, and the trunk opens. Good experience design isn't good screens. It's good experiences. When I got off my flight here in the Sydney airport, I saw this ad. It says, what if your phone could make your car cooler? And in the corner, it says, innovation that excites. And this is an app from Nissan, and you can go through all the steps and eventually figure out a way to cool off your car. Nah, on a hot day, this is actually kind of useful, right? You mean utility-wise, you can cool off your car, but it embraces screens, right? Not typical processes. On a hot day, when we go somewhere like a shopping mall, we park our car and we go inside and we do the thing we really want to be doing at the mall, right? Which is shopping, watching a movie. You don't pull out your phone in the middle of a movie to cool off your car, right? It's kind of silly. Design team at Toyota thought about this, and they put this really simple sensor, a thermometer sensor, inside the car. When it gets really hot, the sunroof opens and a small fan blows out the hot air out of the car. And the beautiful thing about the whole system is that it's solar powered, because on a hot day you can assume it's bright outside. So it doesn't drain any energy from the car, it doesn't use any gas to work. The second principle is to leverage computers instead of catering to them. Computers are incredibly smart things. They can calculate incredibly complex stuff. But we treat them like they're 3-year-olds. We make them that way. And so they say bizarre things back to us like this. This is a real error message from Microsoft. And it happened because of this bizarre relationship that we have with computers. See, we serve computers. We have to memorize countless passwords with an uppercase letter, a number, a punctuation mark. We have to remember the best friend's childhood dog. We have to search complex databases for simple information. I say let's reverse this relationship. Let's have computers serve us. A few months ago, an emergency room physician contacted me about a headlamp that does just this. See, this emergency room physician does cave search and rescue, which is by no means an easy task. It requires crawling into small crevices, searching for panicked survivors. And he emailed me about this headlamp. It's made by Petzl. And after 40 years of making headlamps, Petzl didn't slap an interface on it. They tried to solve a problem. See, when you're doing search and rescue, bright, high beam is necessary to look into a deep, dark cave. But that same bright beam whitewashes a map you're holding, a map that will lead you to the survivors. So Petzl put a microchip and a light sensor in the headlamp, and when you look at your map, the light dims. And when you look further away, the light brightens. It does more than take away an inconvenience. It actually makes the physician better at his job. When we serve computers, we fill up databases. But when computers serve us, they can help us do great things like save lives. Computers should do things that we don't want to do or things that we don't even know we should do. When Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, he gave a speech that said that America could reduce its dependency on foreign oil if its citizens properly inflated its car tires. The idea was mocked by the opposing party, who sent out these tire pressure gauges with Obama's energy plan printed on them. But on this particular issue, it turned out he was right. If you properly inflate your car tires, you can actually save gas, reducing foreign dependency on oil. In fact, if you properly inflate your car tires, it's actually safer. But this isn't a really commonly known thing, and actually everybody here now knows about it since I've shared it with you guys, but it isn't a very fun experience. Even though you all know about it, you probably won't do it. I mean, you go to the gas station, you have to pump quarters into this machine to buy air, which feels like a weird thing to do. And then you lean over and you kind of show the world something you don't really want to be showing them. So what does a major tire manufacturing company do about this? Well, Goodyear has an app, and it lets you do incredible things like print and email brochures. But fortunately, Goodyear has started to think beyond screens. And in their innovation lab in Ohio, they've made this. This is a self-inflating tire. There's a little mechanism inside the tire, and while you're driving, it checks to see if the tire pressure is right. And if it isn't, a valve opens and fills with air, always giving you the right amount of air pressure. The third principle is to create a system that adapts for individuals. Everyone here is unique. You're all sitting in your chairs in a unique way. You're all wearing different outfits. You all have your own favorite way of getting something done. But that's not how we build software. We build software based on commonality. It takes a really smart team to solve some problems for some people. But there's a different form of thinking, and that's data science that looks more at individuals. And it's given us some things in interfaces like LinkedIn recommendations about people you know or jobs you might be interested in. But there's so much more that data science can do. When we leave interfaces behind, data science can really start to thrive. A very simple example is Nest, right? It looks like on the outset a thermometer with a screen slapped on it. But when it gets interesting is when it learns about you. When it learns what kinds of temperatures you like over the course of a day, a month, a year, and uses its sensors to know if you're home or away, and eventually you don't have to interact with it at all. It becomes a NoUI experience. But interfaces in general force us to be reactive, and NoUI can allow us to be proactive. This is early sense. It's a sensor built for hospitals that slides under a hospital bed. And what it does is it reads your vitals. Instead of all these machines that kind of wires and stuff that you hook up to, early sense sits underneath the mattress. And it reads your heart rate and your pulse. And it lets you rest in the bed as you normally would. See, a typical hospital machine is reactive. It reports things after they happen. And it is based on sort of generic data, right? This is generic limitation here, and then a generic alarm just kind of blasts into the hospital. In fact, these generic alarms that just kind of go off when a patient is in trouble is actually a problem. The Boston Globe found that from January 2005 to June 2010, over 200 people died in the United States because an alarm went off generically in a hospital and a healthcare worker didn't realize. So over 200 people died because of a generic alarm that wasn't noticed. But early sense is different. It gets to know you. It understands your patterns. It understands you at an individual level. And when something is wrong about your patterns, it alerts your healthcare provider that something may be wrong. And it can actually help identify things hours ahead of time. We are all different, and a world of NoUI can embrace that reality. So I first published The Best Interface is No Interface in August 2012 on the Cooper Journal. And it kind of took off, and a lot of people started tweeting about it. We got some press in The Verge and on BBC. Google has recently started to use some of the phrases like no interface or screenless computing. Other people have written negative pieces like no to NoUI. Scott Birkin said, who cares about any of this? But along the way, there's been a lot of interesting discourse. And one of the things people have brought up is automatic solutions. A lot of people are afraid of automatic solutions. And they should be. They're really hard to get right. But when you get them right, they become an embedded part of our lives. Automatically deploying airbags, for example, save our lives in car accidents. We don't even think twice about automatically sliding doors. Which are in hospitals and markets. But I think the most interesting automatic solution is automatic transmission. Right? I mean, can you imagine walking to an executive boardroom and proposing an automatic solution for one of the most dangerous places you can be? Driving down a freeway, having a machine automatically shift gears. I mean, this is pretty nuts. And you do a little bit of market research and you realize that people who really love driving hate automatic transmission. But the common everyday person loves automatic stuff when it works right. In the United States, by 2009, 91% of all cars sold had automatic transmission. What about failure? Right? I think any great system considers failure as a possibility. I mean, even an automatic sliding door, which is not a life or death matter, has often a failure mechanism. If the power goes out, you can push to open the doors. But what some people have started to do in these more complex systems is they've shifted the UI from being the primary to being the secondary interaction. I think this is a really nice shift. Actually, the headlamp that I showed earlier, Petzl headlamp, has a piece of software that comes with it that not a lot of people probably use, but allows you to adjust what those beams exactly will be. Nest, of course, as I showed, always has an interface available to you. And early sense, being in a medical environment, really needs to be transparent about what's going on, and so there's a complex UI that goes along with it. What about the web? I mean, this is a web conference. I've been talking a lot about products or apps. What about things that live online? Well, is NoUI possible? Absolutely. I mean, this is TripIt, right? It's a web service, but it has the capability to scan your Gmail and self-populate your calendar with your flight information, with your itinerary information, with no interaction needed, no UI needed from the user's perspective. Pandora's goal is to eventually get to know you well enough so you just put on your headphones and you press play, and there really isn't any interaction beyond that. Even Mint has some of these NoUI features where it's always working for you in the background, and if something happens, like a foreign transaction fee, it'll let you know about it and even suggest a credit card where that's not the case. So this is kind of a fun topic to talk about, and it's funny and it's great, but how do you really do this? Right? I mean, this is really complicated and not easy to create these NoUI systems. When I first published the piece, I quoted something that Donald Norman, who's an author and Northwestern professor, said about interfaces. And after it got popular, we exchanged some emails, and we did a little bit of a debate. He took the anti-position, I took the pro-position, and we kind of engaged in an audience and talked through NoUI. And at the end, I handed out this worksheet, and this worksheet was focused on how. And it was based around the 3 principles. The first principle is embrace typical processes instead of screens. And so I put some of these observations on the sheet of paper. The second principle is leverage computers instead of catering to them. And one way to do that is to take advantage of the growing list of sensors that are out there, and even the devices out there that have pretty simple sensors in them. This is Twine that has a couple built in. Leap Motion, which has some really nice gestural sensor, and it's shown here with a UI, but it could be used for all sorts of things. And so I put a list of sensors on that same worksheet. The third principle is adapt to individuals, and there's a huge growing set of different platforms that can allow for great data science and a never-ending list of APIs and public data sets that you can pull from. And I put on there a little bit of the data science. We gave everybody 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, a room of people who had never met each other before, 10 minutes to come up with a solution to one of these observations. And some of the ideas were kind of silly. I mean, one of the things I put on there was about senior citizens forgetting to take their medication. And there's been some progress in coming more clear about prescription medication, and Target has worked with a woman named Deborah Alder to create these more easy-to-read prescription bottles. But a lot of people still forget to take their medication. And so this group came up with the idea of using your nose as a notification system, so that when your last pill runs out, it smells like pine in the room, and that reminds you to take another pill. Kind of silly, kind of out there, but a lot more interesting than your typical notification system that's screen-based. Another problem I put on there was around running shoes. Now, I'm a runner, and the only piece of equipment you have when you run is your shoes. And unlike your leisure shoes, your running shoes wear out when the sole compresses. So as the more and more you run, the more your sole compresses, and it becomes unsupported to your knees and your ankles. And there's all sorts of shoe trackers out there, all sorts of apps and websites where after you go running, you come back home and you enter how many miles you ran, and then it kind of guesses if your shoes are dead or not. But what one of the groups thought is you could put a little piece of dye inside the sole, and when the sole compresses enough, the dye explodes and it turns red. It's a NoUI solution that lets you know what's going on. They even thought you could put a small radio and battery in there so that when your shoes compress, it orders you a new pair of shoes off Zappos. pretty awesome. Actually, I shared this idea at South by Southwest, and a guy from Zappos came up to me afterwards to ask who those people were and if he could hire them. Anyway, so this was one of the ideas that came out of the workshop, and some people criticized it. You know, they said, this is running shoes. What does this have to do with technology? And a few months later, I started to get a bunch of emails in my inbox because a patent surfaced from Apple. They put a sensor in the heel of running shoes, and if something went wrong, LED lights would light up. I mean, there was a room full of people who had never met each other before, and in 10 minutes came up with nearly an identical idea that a room full of Apple designers came up with and decided to spend legal fees to patent. There's a lot to talk about with NoUI. There's a lot of places we can go with it. You'd always feel free to tweet to me or send me an email. Some of the more interesting things that are going on is that people are using this NoUI hashtag and starting to have conversations around where this idea could go. I've started to build a website called nointerface.com, and right now, there's really not a whole lot on it. There's videos of me, which is kind of a meta moment. And you can also download a PDF packet, which has the worksheet that I shared at the workshop, the original essay, and some slides from this presentation. There's so much to celebrate in technology today, but there's an awful trend dominating a lot of our thinking. And I hope you've heard some ideas about how we can get away from it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Golden. Any questions or comments for Golden? Please raise your hand if there is. Yep, there's one over there.
Hello.
Hi.
The way I see it, basically, in a sense, what you're talking about is automation. And maybe I should start from the end, saying I don't want it to be portrayed like I disagree with you, because I think to a large extent we can definitely find great ways to make users' life easier, exactly like you showed. However, once you open that topic for discussion, I think you should also regard, and I would be happy if you will regard now, issues of responsibility, moral, and ethics. And by that I mean, for example, if you have adaptive cruise controls that take away the interface and basically let the car decide when to accelerate and decelerate. A few years ago in the United States, Toyota car decided to accelerate by themselves. A person in a situation like that crashes, who is accountable? United States Army today and other armies around the world develops a mechanism that can basically patrol the borders, identify movement, and take down the target automatically, no interface at all. However, the decision at the moment is not to implement. So I think issues like that should be regarded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to be transparent and responsible with anything that you create in technology, whether it has to do with these ideas of no interface or something else, right? We have so much power and such great ability to do so many things. I think a lot of this relies on data tracking and understanding the people that your users. And I think you have to be transparent about what you're tracking, how you're tracking it, and you have to always provide for people a way to shut that off. I mean, I think it's easy to get irresponsible. I mean, we see this in privacy ways with websites like Facebook or Google all the time. And I think that having that transparency and having that responsibility is absolutely important. It's hard to police it, for sure. There is no universal body right now that does that kind of thing. But you're right, this and any other sort of technology that's emerging could always be scary if it's in the wrong hands and used in the wrong way.
Golden, you work at Samsung, but you didn't actually mention any of the work you're doing there. Are you able to talk about anything?
Unfortunately, I'm not.
Is that in case anything from Apple's here? Well, as before, we've got a bit of time to kill. So what about, the coffee's not going to be ready yet for another half hour or so. Why don't we do one of the challenges that you set for your people in the workshop?
Oh, wow.
Is that possible to do?
Certainly.
Could you maybe put up an example of a scenario that we need to work on? Maybe we could all, people could talk amongst themselves? What do you think?
Yeah,
What was one of the scenarios?
Well, let's pull it up. not ready for this, but I can get ready.
Okay.
I should have this hidden somewhere. Oh, no one can see it. Perfect.
Should I put you on the spot?
No, it's fine. Okay, how should I do this?
Okay, so everyone can see that.
Cool.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you see that? Okay, great. Okay, so this is the NoUI worksheet that you can actually download online. And to the right there, these are the example problems. The first one says, Mike can't function without good sleep, but he's a new parent with a baby that needs attention throughout the night. He wishes he had a better way to get rest. So what we did in the workshop is we give people one of these problems, right? And hopefully you can read them, but it goes A through F there. And then you can choose. So you choose sort of, this is a sample potential toolkit. This is not necessarily everything that's in your toolkit, but these are some things you can consider while you try to create a NoUI way to solve these problems. And at the top are the NoUI principles, right? Trying to embrace typical processes, leveraging computers. But it's really the thing on the right, choosing one of those problems to solve, and then using some of the tools on the left. That's how the worksheet works. Here, you know what? I'll show you an example of how a team solved it. So I gave these second sheets here on the right, which is just kind of like a cartoon strip, right? And you kind of draw out the problem. And so this is the example that I talked about earlier. They chose to use an internet connection and to use a colored dye. And then they applied it to Craig's problem of his running shoes. And they made this drawing that I edited later. This is Craig. He needs to get shoes every 300 miles. When his shoes need to get replaced, his midsoles turn to the color red. So it doesn't even take a whole lot of steps to explain the idea. I mean, this happened in 3 panels here. But yeah, feel free to take a shot at talking to your neighbor about some of these potential NoUI solutions to some of these problems.
How does the Transport Safety Authority feel about the little Wi-Fi radio in the shoe? Does that go down well?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, well, feel free to talk amongst yourselves about that. But otherwise, please join me in thanking Golden Krishna once more.
Thanks, guys.